"Back away from the gate, or I cite you," Bethany snapped, bolt cutters glinting as she shouldered past my sister. "You touch that Jeep, and you're on video stealing federal property," Maya said. "Phone up." Voice level. The tow driver squinted at the decals. "Ma'am, this is government. I'm not touching it." "It's an abandoned commercial vehicle," Bethany shot back, thrusting a paper no one signed. Her hand closed around the chain. Clang one bite, then another. The gate shuddered as she slapped on her own lock and pocketed the keys. "Jurisdiction ends at my fence," she said to the camera, daring the sirens already threading the morning air. Question for everyone watching. What would you do if your neighbor's hobby was breaking federal law before breakfast? Keep that answer ready, because this isn't a parking dispute. It's a fuse that just met fire. My name is Marcus Tank Rodriguez. 3 months ago, I thought inheriting Grandma Rosa's place was a blessing. Willowbrook Estates looked safe. Beige homes in straight lines, sprinklers on timer, hedges trimmed like buzz cuts. The HOA fees promised community standards. Translation: pay monthly so someone can tell you your trash can is shy of the curb by 2 inches. I'm an Army Reserve MP, newly assigned to a federal drug task force. The plan was simple: rent the house during deployments, build equity, honor the woman who raised me after a wreck at 12 left the world too quiet. The floors still echo her advice: stand up to bullies, but do it the right way. So I did what good soldiers do: document, verify, proceed. And if you've ever been squeezed by a rule waved like a weapon, you already know how fast community can turn into leverage. Enter Bethany Kensington Wright, 52, white Lexus, tape measure for grass, 7 years as HOA president and counting. Her husband Carl sits on city committees and wears connections like armor. She mails violations for Christmas lights in January and smiles while doing it. 2 weeks into my deployment, the email landed. Violation notice. Unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. My government-issued Jeep Wrangler, clearly marked, was suddenly an eyesore. The bylaws, she claimed, banned work vehicles in driveways. Here's what she didn't know, and what you need to hear. That Jeep carried 6 figures of task force surveillance gear trackers, encrypted radios, covert cameras, federal property that only authorized hands move. She started the meter at $50 a day, while I was dodging people who shoot back. Tell me in comments, has a fine ever felt less like a fee and more like a hand on your throat? Maya tried reason. She brought my deployment orders, the exemption clause, even offered a tarp. Bethany didn't flinch. Rules are rules. Maybe your family doesn't belong here. Then the threat, a lien if we didn't comply, and a reminder that Carl knows people at the school district. That call broke something in me. My sister teaches middle school. She buys pencils for kids who can't. Hearing her whisper, "Tank, they could hurt my job," hit harder than any blast I've heard overseas, so we checked the paper trail. Grandma saved everything, right down to receipts for light bulbs. In a brittle folder from 1987 sat the original bylaws, exemptions for government, emergency, and military vehicles in plain text, clear as day. Bethany wasn't enforcing rules, she was inventing them and betting no one would look. Neighbors whispered over fences, eyes down. Fear is quiet until it isn't. The pattern snapped into focus. A Marine got cited for a hostile motorcycle. A Navy wife paid fines for unprofessional garden gnomes. The same families, the same pressure, the same offers to relieve the burden if they sold. That's not maintenance. That's a playbook. I started lining up dots. A president with power, a spouse with pull, and a fine structure that only grew. This wasn't about curb appeal. It was targeted pressure masquerading as policy. For those of you who faced a board meeting alone, palms sweating while someone reads a list of your violations, hear this. Intimidation is a tactic, not a law. In my world, you don't fight a tactic head on. You expose it, piece by piece, until it has nowhere to hide. That was the course I set from a bunker half a world away. Then Bethany moved from paper to muscle, her security contractor cornered Maya in a grocery lot. "We need to discuss your brother's military activities," he said, trying to box her in. "That vehicle could hold equipment risky to community safety." Maya hit record. "You're saying a deployed soldier is a threat to families?" He stepped closer. "Military situations bring problems. PTSD, weapons, surveillance. That smear is old and ugly. It also did us a favor." On video, he admitted they were investigating surveillance equipment. We forwarded the clip. By dawn, their licensing was under review, the guards vanished, and Bethany's panic hit the gas. She filed complaints everywhere: police, fire, code, animal control, building a paper trail of her obsession with the word federal. She didn't know the Jeep was already writing its own report. Alerts, GPS, interior camera, all time-stamped the second her cutters bit steel, which brings us back to 6:47 a.m. The tow company took one look and fled. Bethany locked the gate and trapped a federal vehicle behind her fence, declaring HOA land a no-law zone. That single act converted a petty saga into felony obstruction. The neighborhood watched it live. Mrs. Patterson called veterans she buried sons with. By 10, a human wall stood around Grandma's curb. Tom Henderson planted his boots and said, "You want that truck? Step through 30 of us first." When the U.S. Marshals arrived, Marshal Jennifer Torres looked at the fresh lock and gave Bethany a final out. "Open the gate." Bethany folded her arms. "I don't recognize federal authority here. The sky didn't crack, the earth didn't shake, just a pen scratching notes and a career in handcuffs arranging itself. And me? I'm still the kid Rosa raised, doing it the right way." Bethany thought she was pushing a family. She woke a task force. "This HOA racket is my next takedown." "Take your hands off that mailbox," Maya said, steady but loud enough for the tow driver idling at the curb. Bethany didn't blink. She shoved a registered letter at my sister like it was a warrant. 24 hours. After that, emergency tow, she announced. "Chin up, heels biting concrete. You touch that Jeep and you're stealing federal property," Maya replied. Camera rolling. The driver leaned out his window, reading the federal decals, then swore under his breath. Bethany slapped the envelope against the lens. "Health and safety violation. Neighborhood degradation. My authority." Maya pointed to the gate camera. "And my evidence." Bethany smiled the way people do when they think the rules belong to them. "Tell your brother the clock's ticking." For everyone listening, what do you do when the person with the clipboard decides the law stops at your fence? Hold that thought, because that letter wasn't notice. It was a shot across the bow, and we were done taking hits. I'm Marcus Tank Rodriguez, Army Reserve MP and fresh to a federal drug task force. From a desert bunker, I read that letter twice, then called JAG. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams listened, pulled my case file, and her tone changed from polite to surgical. "This isn't an HOA dispute," she said. "It's interference with federal equipment, and your service members' Civil Relief Act rights are in play. Most folks think SCRA is about rent and loans. It's also about shielding deployed service members from this exact ambush. More to the point, the Jeep isn't mine. It's government property with classified hardware." Williams hit send on a complaint to base command. A liaison flagged the situation to the right desks. Translation: Bethany's letter had just been stapled to a federal file with my name on it and hers. While lawyers stirred, Maya dug. In a stack of 2019 minutes, she found a letter Bethany had slipped to the Planning Commission, dressed in polite grammar and sharpened intent. Transient military populations do not maintain long-term community investment standards. That's code for keep uniforms out. She photographed the page as the paper crumbled, then kept reading. The names stung. Families we knew. People who brought casserole when Grandma fell. "Tank," Maya whispered. "She's been doing this for years. Every citation we thought was petty suddenly looked like policy. Squeeze the military, spook the elderly, make it easier to relieve burdens at a discount. If you've ever wondered how discrimination hides in plain sight, it borrows letterhead and calls itself standards. Follow the money and the picture sharpens. Carl Bethany's husband was shepherding a luxury condo plan that needed clean marketing and clean minutes. Military trucks and deployment schedules aren't exclusive in a brochure, so the pressure campaign grew legs. The Hendersons got hit for a bike on a porch. The Washingtons got noise complaints because their newborn didn't run on HOA hours. Parents at Maya's school started asking if a family with security issues should be teaching their kids. The principal invited her for a conversation. That word felt like a trap in a polite suit. If your reputation's ever been smudged by rumor echoing off official walls, you know that helpless tastes like metal and sand while you wait your turn to speak. Bethany didn't wait. She arrived with a tape measure, a phone, and that realtor's smile. Click, click, click. Heels on concrete, camera on my Jeep, voice pitched to ensure neighbors heard. Military service doesn't excuse noncompliance, she said, angling a shot at the dash. Perhaps this neighborhood isn't right for your lifestyle. Lifestyle is how bullies say outsider. She worked the perimeter like she owned the deed, then leaned to photograph inside glass. That crossed a line. I opened my laptop halfway across the world and armed the Jeep's security package. GPS logs, motion capture, automatic snapshots for anything inside 15 feet. By nightfall, we had a timeline, 17 trespasses in 3 days, each stamped with time, location, and the president of our HOA fishing for a view of classified gear. Her next escalation rolled up in a white SUV labeled Security. ExecuSafe came hourly, pacing the curb like vultures reading a training manual. They snapped pictures, then started educating neighbors. Military vehicles equal danger. Surveillance attracts crime. Families like ours bring instability. Maya called me from the kitchen where Grandma taught us to stretch rice and laugh anyway. "They're saying you're dangerous," she said. "That word again? Dangerous." I reached Captain Sarah Chen, my task force supervisor. "If we come in heavy now," she warned, "we validate their smear. We need them to hang themselves on tape and in paperwork. Keep collecting. I'll quietly wake the right people." Sometimes the smartest punch is letting the other side throw one more. At 1:43 a.m., the Jeep's infrared woke. Footsteps. A flashlight combing the dash. The camera snapped 3 frames of Bethany pointing out components to a guard, then a close-up of her hand testing the door. She wasn't documenting a violation. She was mapping federal comms. That's not nosy, it's a criminal threshold. We packaged the stills, the trespass logs, and the audio of her security lecture and pushed it up the chain. By noon, a federal licensing review clipped ExecuSafe's wings. The SUV disappeared without a goodbye. Bethany's response was predictable and fatal. More letters, more calls, more emergency language sprayed across agencies like perfume that couldn't hide the stink of panic. Paper trails, don't forget, neither do cameras. 48 hours later came the registered envelope and a tow truck circling like a shark that smelled its own fear. The driver stepped out, read the federal decals again, then looked at Maya's phone pointed square at his face. "Ma'am, I'm not touching that," he said, climbing back in. Bethany hissed at him to do his job, then pivoted to intimidation. She CC'd Carl's office, left voicemails with code enforcement about explosive hazards, and hinted to the PTA that military surveillance equipment was parked near a school bus stop. If you're watching this and thinking none of that could be real, ask yourself why it's printed, stamped, and signed. The most dangerous lies wear the right fonts. We didn't hide. We documented. JAG filed. Base liaison opened a line with the marshals. I drafted a statement for Maya to read to any uniform that knocked. Federal property, deployed owner, SCRA rights, original 1987 bylaw exemption paragraph ready for daylight. Meanwhile, neighbors started choosing sides. Some ducked behind curtains. Others brought coffee and stood on the lawn. Quiet but present. "Tell me if you need me, mister." Henderson said, hand on the flagpole he never put away. If you've stood on a curb waiting for backup, you know how that single sentence can reset your breathing. Bullies count on silence. Crowds change math. For everyone who's lived this dance, letters, threats, The ritual humiliation of a hearing. Here's the part you can use tomorrow morning. A registered letter isn't a badge. Emergency on letterhead isn't magic. If you're deployed, SCRA is a shield. If a board invents rules, ask for the original documents, not the retyped pamphlet they wave at curbside. If private security points a camera at federal gear, that's not compliance, it's a police report. And if someone with a title tells you the law stops at their fence, smile, check the record light, and let them keep talking. Paper and pixels love arrogance. We didn't win that day. Not yet. But we set the board. With every trespass log, every minute of footage, every neighbor's statement, the image sharpened, a coordinated push to squeeze out uniforms and flip homes into a brochure. Bethany called it standards. We called it what it was. The next move would be hers, because it always is with people who need the last word. And when she made it, at an hour when good people are still making coffee, she'd trade a clipboard for bolt cutters and mistake a subdivision gate for a fortress. That, as they say, is another scene one where the sirens finally sounded like a promise. "Put that letter down and step away from my sister," Maya said, holding her phone up so the red recording dot filled the screen. Bethany didn't flinch. She pressed a registered envelope against Maya's chest, like it was a court order. 24 hours, she said, voice clipped. Then, emergency towing. The tow driver idled, eyes on the federal decals across my Jeep's door, then shook his head. "Ma'am, that's government." Bethany's smile thinned. "Health and safety violation, neighborhood degradation. I have authority." Maya pointed to the gate camera. "And I have evidence." Bethany slid a new lock through the chain and snapped it shut, metal ringing in the quiet street. "Jurisdiction ends at this fence," she told the lens, pocketing the keys. For everyone listening right now, answer this. If your neighbor decided the law stopped at her property line, would you bow your head or hit record and make her say it again? I'm Marcus Tank Rodriguez, Army Reserve MP assigned to a federal drug task force. 3 months ago, I inherited my grandmother's house in Willowbrook Estates, a place where lawns are graded like exams and bylaws get quoted like scripture. I plan to rent it during deployments, build equity, and honor Rosa, who raised me after the wreck that took my parents. The floors still hold the rhythm of her steps, and one rule I can hear even now: stand up to bullies, do it the right way. So when a forged violation turned my government-issued Jeep into an eyesore, I didn't bark, I documented. I checked the real bylaws. I called the right numbers. Quick pulse check for the audience. Have you ever gotten a notice that felt less like a rule and more like a grip around your throat? That's where this started. It wouldn't end there. The letter that hit Maya's mailbox was theater with postage. Immediate removal or emergency towing within 24 hours. It said CC'd to Carl's city office and local police to look official. The language immediate hazard, degradation, was designed to scare. From a desert bunker, I read it, breathed once, and dialed JAG. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams scanned my file and her tone changed from polite to precise. "This isn't an HOA dispute," she said. "It's interference with federal equipment, and the Service Members Civil Relief Act is in play. People think SCRA is just rent and loans. It's also a shield when someone tries to weaponize paperwork against a deployed soldier's property. More important, that Jeep isn't mine to surrender. It's U.S. government equipment." Williams filed with Base Command. A liaison opened a review. Bethany thought she'd bluff with letterhead. She'd just put her name in a federal inbox. While the legal gears engaged, Maya turned archivist. In yellowed minutes from 2019, she found a letter Bethany sent planners in careful, sterile words. "Transient military populations do not maintain long-term community investment standards." Translation: keep uniforms out. The page cracked as Maya photographed it, then kept going. Citations lined up. A Marine dinged for a porch bike, a Navy family fined for excessive noise when their baby cried. None of it random. All of it useful to someone selling exclusive living. Carl, the councilman with the developer handshake, needed clean minutes and cleaner marketing. Work trucks, deployment schedules, and federal decals don't photograph well in glossy brochures. Audience, you've seen this play. Wrap discrimination in standards, then smile as you pass the plate. Pressure works best when it's quiet. Bethany didn't stay quiet. Heels clicking like a metronome, she staged a property inspection. Tape measure in one hand, phone in the other, narrating for anyone within earshot. Service does not excuse noncompliance, she told Maya, angling shots through the window at the Dash hardware. Perhaps your family should consider whether this neighborhood suits your lifestyle. Lifestyle is how people say outsider without saying it. That night, I armed the Jeep's full security suite motion sensors, infrared, proximity camera, automatic stills within 15 feet. The map lit up, 17 trespasses in 3 days. Timestamps, angles, approach patterns. This wasn't code enforcement, it was casing. Harassment at scale turns into something uglier when the lens lingers on federal comms. 3 days after Jack moved, Bethany hired ExecuSafe Security to patrol compliance. A white SUV looped the block hourly, lenses pointed at my Jeep, radio mics buzzing. The guards didn't just film, they briefed. Military vehicles draw danger. Surveillance attracts crime. Families like that bring instability. Maya called me from Grandma's kitchen, where vanilla candles couldn't smother the sour edge of fear. "They're telling neighbors you're a threat," she said, voice shaking. I reached Captain Sarah Chen, my task force supervisor. "If we go loud now, we validate their smear," she said. "Let them hang themselves. Keep collecting. I'll nudge the right doors." Sometimes command sounds like patience when you want a wrecking ball. Sometimes patience is the wrecking ball. At 1:43 a.m., the Jeep's infrared woke to footsteps and a blade of light. Click 3 frames of Bethany pressing her face to glass, finger tracing the outline of equipment she did not understand. Another frame with her pointing and whispering while a guard photographed panels and serial plates. Then the handle test. That crossed a border even she didn't see. We bundled logs, stills, and audio of their community safety pitch into a neat package, pushed it to federal licensing. By lunch, ExecuSafe status was under review, and the white SUV vanished like a ghost that knew dawn had arrived. Bethany answered with more letters, more voicemails, more emergency claims to any agency that would pick up. Paper can shield, it can also sink. And then the clock hit 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Bolt cutters bit, metal sang. The gate shuddered. Discount Dave's towing rolled in. The driver took one look at federal decals and backed out like the truck was radioactive. "No amount of cash," he muttered, tires chirping as he left. Bethany doubled down. She slid a fresh HOA lock through the gate, trapping federal property inside private fencing and announcing on camera that she didn't recognize outside authority in her community. That move changed the verbs. Not cite or fine, obstruct, interfere, tamper. The Jeep's kill switch armed. GPS pinged through systems she'd never heard of. Homeland Security reports populated without a single raised voice. Maya's phone kept rolling. Evidence doesn't need volume, it needs clarity. When community fear breaks, it does it in a single morning. Mrs. Patterson, who buried 2 sons in uniform, called every neighbor with a spine. By 10, Grandma's curb held coffee cups and quiet resolve. Tom Henderson planted his boots and his flag. "You want that truck," he said. "You step through 30 of us first." Some people watched from curtains. Others stepped onto the grass and stayed. For everyone who wonders whether neighbors still stand up, some do. They just need a spark. Sirens washed the street. Marshal Jennifer Torres walked to the new lock, listened to Bethany say no federal jurisdiction, and wrote 2 words that might as well have been handcuffs. Statement recorded. Arrogance loves microphones. So do prosecutors. 72 hours later, I stepped off a plane tasting dust and adrenaline. The kitchen table was a command post poured out of manila and ink. 5 years of minutes, budgets, emails, Maya slid a contract across wood worn smooth by Rosa's elbows. Kensington Urban Holdings Carl's shell linked to Eastbrook Development. Acquisition strategy, Phase 2, dated months before I inherited the house. An appendix listed targets: elderly, deployed, single income, anyone easy to pressure. Acquisition facilitation in tidy print. They had pre-sold units they didn't own by engineering non-compliance until people sold cheap. I flipped to the bylaws, real ones, from 1987 with the line that mattered. Government, emergency, and military vehicles are exempt. Bethany's pamphlet was fiction printed in HOA fonts. The money trail stank. Over 3 years, $184,000 in consulting and improvement checks flowed from HOA accounts to Carl's company with no resident approval and no asphalt poured. When funds move on fake invoices and cross state lines, you're not in community standards anymore. You're in mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Layer intimidation across families, and you're brushing RICO organized patterns that touch commerce and lives. We weren't shouting that into the wind. We were laying it in order for people whose job is to follow patterns to their last dot. And while paper told one story, grief told another. Maya's hands shook as she unfolded violation notices stamped during Grandma's final weeks in hospice. Weeds too high, blinds uneven, paint fading, threats of legal action mailed to a woman who could no longer lift her head. Her blood pressure spiked every time the door clicked, Maya said. The nurse had heard her ask whether we'd lose the house. I had heard it too and dismissed it as morphine talk. It wasn't. It was Rosa reading what we refused to. If you've ever had to say out loud that you missed a warning from someone you loved, you know the weight that sits behind your ribs and won't move. By the time the marshals circled back with warrants, the story was no longer an HOA scuffle. It was discrimination disguised as policy, embezzlement masked as improvement, obstruction dressed as emergency, and a private kingdom claiming borders against the law. Bethany thought a clipboard made her untouchable. Carl thought a committee made him invisible. They were wrong. I'm still Rosa's grandson. I still do it the right way. But right doesn't mean soft. It means step by step, receipt by receipt, frame by frame, until the people who break a neighborhood for profit hear the only sentence that matters. We saw, we recorded, and now you answer. Audience, tell me this. If your name had been on that target list, would you have moved? Or would you have stayed and turned the lights on? Put the envelope away, Bethany, Maya said. Phone raised, the little red light burning like a warning. Take it, Bethany hissed, pushing the bulging packet toward her. 50,000. You and your brother find a neighborhood that suits your lifestyle. Maya didn't move. You're bribing a federal witness, she said clearly, so the mic would love every syllable. Bethany's smile twitched. It's a settlement. A kindness. The air between them snapped when Maya stepped forward. Say the number again. 50. Bethany repeated, jaw tight. A sedan's door clicked down the row. The driver pretended to sort groceries while a tiny lens watched. Last chance, Bethany whispered. Walk away before this gets ugly. Maya angled her phone higher. Ugly already arrived when you targeted military families. For those listening, answer this. If someone tried to buy your silence, would you take the cash or press record and end the game? The war room rose inside Grandma's living room within 48 hours, the same space where she used to scold telenovela villains for lying. Now it held laptops, power strips, and legal pads stacked like sandbags. The vanilla candle smell was gone, replaced by burnt coffee and printer heat. Captain Sarah Chen walked in with 2 federal prosecutors, all business. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez spread Maya's files across the table and let out a low whistle. Rodriguez, I've seen cartel ledgers thinner than this. Maya, no longer the scared teacher, was assigning tasks, routing calls, and color-coding evidence tabs. I watched my kid sister command veteran volunteers and federal suits without raising her voice. Audience check. Have you ever seen a person flip the switch from victim to organizer? It feels like watching a storm gather behind their eyes, controlled, targeted, unstoppable. Martinez connected the dots with a kind of clarity that makes rooms go quiet. When a private board forges rules, targets a protected group, skims funds, and launders the proceeds through development deals that cross state lines, the label stops being bad HOA. It becomes organized crime. Interstate commerce made it federal. The scheme was simple and filthy. Bethany's citations softened the ground, Carl's city clout greased the zoning path, and out-of-state buyers wired deposits on properties they didn't own yet. Every forged notice, every emergency letter, every intimidation call, those were predicate acts in a racketeering pattern. "You brought us a roadmap," Martinez said, eyes on Maya. "Now we drive it to the courthouse." Translation for anyone trapped under a petty tyrant: the moment patterns touch money and borders, your bully just graduated to federal defendant. Allies flooded Grandma's house like a resistance network that remembered how to stand. Tom Henderson arrived with 12 veterans who'd survived real wars and had zero fear of committee bullies. Mrs. Patterson unfurled photo sheets. Midnight meetings in the community center. Bethany and Carl whispering under exit lights. The teachers' union sent communicators who knew how to translate legalese into kitchen table language for working families. Maya's voice threaded the rooms, steady, precise. The financial crime offended her most. She kept repeating something our mother used to say at this table. "Budgets tell the truth, people won't." A spreadsheet glowed $184,000 siphoned to Carl's shell via consulting and improvements no one could find outside a check register. Not mistakes, a plan. Forensic accountant Jennifer Walsh sketched the engine under the hood. Pre-sell units to a developer hungry for turnkey acquisitions. Use HOA pressure to force distressed sales from families listed on a target sheet, elderly, deployed, single income. Close cheap, flip fast. Send progress pics to investors who never ask about tiers behind doorknobs. Email threads proved intent. Carl discussing displacement timelines with Eastbrook Development months before Grandma died. The language was sterile facilitation compliance events, but the meaning was theft in a necktie. I'd studied advanced fee schemes at the academy. This was the suburban version, greased by a seal that said community. If you've ever wondered how crimes put on khakis, this is how. The signatures look neat, and the damage smells like fresh paint. We mixed military discipline with neighborhood grit and built our own surveillance web. Mini cameras went up at choke points. Mrs. Patterson's front window became Overwatch. Tom's garage turned into equipment storage. Maya's place ran comms on encrypted apps my task force trusted. Then she flipped the ballot playbook. Most folks don't realize you can recall an HOA board with a petition, usually with signatures from a quarter to a third of owners. Maya knocked doors until knuckles ached. Stories poured out. The Washingtons' newborn labeled excessive noise. The Kowalskis cited for medical equipment disturbance because an oxygen concentrator hummed. Within 72 hours, she had 67% demanding a special election. Paper that once crushed us suddenly carried our weight. The media plan moved like a practice drill. Teachers helped cut explainer videos in plain English. Veteran groups lit up social feeds. 3 members of Congress asked for briefings on discrimination against military families by private boards. While attention climbed, Maya found another thread. Bogus insurance claims Bethany filed for damage my Jeep supposedly caused. Fraud loves paperwork until prosecutors ask for receipts. Civil rights attorneys joined after reviewing the pattern against service families and the elderly. Elder abuse statutes sharpened the edges. The recall meeting drew a packed hall. Bethany tried to gavel us down, but residents voted her out on the spot. By acclamation, they tapped Maya as interim president. Her first act was simple: freeze every HOA account pending federal review. That sound you hear is power changing hands. Panic drives sloppy crimes. At 3:17 a.m., Maya's infrared camera caught Bethany in our backyard, hunched over a metal bin, feeding ledgers to a fire that breathed lighter fluid. The smoke of panic and toner drifted through the window. By dawn, Maya's tires were slashed, windshield sprayed with military scum and red that dripped like an accusation. I felt the old deployment anger cold, focused, useful. Captain Chen made one call. A quiet federal protective detail appeared agents who jogged past with earbuds and sat in coffee shops with eyes like radar. Tom organized veteran night walks. Boots replaced fear on the pavement. Mrs. Patterson baked cookies and assigned patrol slots. Community isn't a word on a brochure. It's the neighbor who leaves a porch light on when you're afraid to sleep. Carl's voice betrayed him on city recordings Maya pulled from public archives. He pressured the police chief to deprioritize complaints from transient military households. The phrasing was polished, the intent wasn't. When a public official uses office to strip rights from a group, it stops being arrogance and starts being a federal civil rights conspiracy. Then came the bribes. Bethany's 50 to Maya was just the opening act. A private investigator on her retainer offered money to ease pressure with agents who, mercifully for the country, think like agents. They took the meetings, recorded every word, and added attempted bribery of federal officers to a stack that was starting to look like a phone book. Audience, if you've ever wondered whether the system still works, sometimes it does one wire at a time. Politics smells fear first. The mayor fled Carl on camera. Council members demanded his resignation. State outlets ran headlines. Carl claimed outside agitators were smearing a successful local businessman. While he performed, the threats began. Notes under wipers. Blocked calls warning that accidents happen to loud teachers. We didn't swing back in the dark. We flipped on more lights. Threats to federal witnesses wake very serious people with very sharp tools. Handwriting specialists, telecom subpoenas, metadata, scrubs, ugly little voices get lonely fast when the line suddenly says, "This call may be recorded by the FBI." Bethany added false police reports to the bonfire, claiming Maya was unstable and plotting violence, claiming armed militias formed at the gate. Obstruction squared. Then the smear went national. Morrison & Associates, the firm that launders reputations after scandals, rolled out a polished story casting me as an unstable veteran with military-grade threats and calling service families a risk factor for suburban peace. It didn't stop at spin. Records showed Bethany had shared model policies with HOA boards in 3 states' templates for managing military disruptions. That phrase belongs in a museum of shame. Cross-state coordination woke the racketeering statutes again. Conspiracy loves company, and now it had an interstate carpool. Captain Chen escalated. The FBI's counterintelligence division treated the illegal trackers found in Maya's car as potential domestic terror surveillance. Classroom windows heard telephoto shutters until unmarked sedans appeared on the far curb, and the shutters went quiet. The moment that blew the doors off came when Morrison published a community safety report full of fabricated statistics blaming veterans for crime, violence, and addiction. It wasn't just offensive, it was engineered to incite discrimination against a protected class. Civil rights groups called it what it was, a paid blueprint for hate. The phones at congressional offices lit up. Military advocacy networks handed our evidence to national outlets. The Military Times ran a front-page series. CNN and Fox called Maya for interviews. Federal teams compared our files with dozens of new complaints. The pattern repeated across 17 states. Same letters, same fines, same targets. Maya's folder system became a template for U.S. attorneys building multi-state RICO and civil rights cases against board cabals that thought private meant above the law. While the case widened, Maya's school became a battlefield. Anonymous complaints flooded the district radicalizing children, anti-community propaganda. The principal called her in under fluorescent lights that made everything feel accusatory. Parents wept at her classroom door and asked how to help. Her students solved it first. They filled the lot with handwritten signs, "We support teacher, Maya," and chanted thank yous that carried over the playground. If you think kids can't smell truth, listen to them when adults start lying. The district, suddenly wary of becoming the villain in a national story, issued a statement backing Maya's service and her rights. In the living room war room, a cheer went up that sounded a lot like hope getting its voice back. Bethany spiraled as consequences drew near. She tried to swap locks at the community center at midnight. She planted a whisper that my Jeep had explosives. She wandered the cul-de-sac in a bathrobe, telling doorbells she didn't recognize outside authority. Each act landed in a file with time, place, and a still frame that would be very educational for a jury. When the marshals arrived with warrants and evidence boxes, the cameras were already there. Carl froze at a council meeting as agents walked past his nameplate. The moment looked small on TV. It felt enormous from our couch. It meant the line between pretend power and real law had been redrawn in ink. Here's what the win looked like. Not in headlines, but in bones. HOA accounts stayed frozen until auditors matched every dollar to an actual shovel. Fines issued under fake rules were voided and repaid with interest. The recall stood. Bethany's seat went vacant, then indicted. Carl's resignation letter arrived without a signature flourish. Insurance carriers clawed back fraudulent claims. Families who'd sold under duress got calls from civil attorneys about restitution. We didn't dance. We filed. We kept the board open until the last receipt met the last lie and the stack finally stopped shaking. Justice isn't fireworks. It's a ledger that balances. By the end, Grandma's living room felt different. The war maps came down. Photos of neighbors who stood up went up. The coffee table held roses and a folded petition rather than exhibits. Maya spoke soft but certain into a webcam, training other communities on how to fight back. Secure the docks, demand originals, film everything, use elections, build alliances, invite daylight. She finished with what Rosa taught us at this very table. Stand up to bullies, but do it the right way. Audience, here's your question before we close. If your board's letters start to feel like threats, will you move out quietly, or will you turn on the lights, knock on doors, and write your own ending? I'm Marcus Tank Rodriguez. I take down criminal networks for a living. I never thought my next target would be an HOA with a logo. But crime is crime, whether it wears camo or khaki, whether it hides in a cartel ledger or a cul-de-sac newsletter. We did not win because we yelled louder. We won because we documented, organized, voted, and refused to be shamed out of our own home. If you're living a version of this, start with one thing. Ask to see the original rules. Then pass the folder to your bravest neighbor and keep passing it until the whole street knows the truth. That's how you break a petty empire. One receipt, one signature, one recorded sentence at a time. Give me the mic. Bethany's voice cut through the roar as she strode down the aisle, heels ticking like a countdown. Maya didn't budge at the podium. Say it to the cameras, she answered, pointing to a wall of lenses. Tell every military kid in this room their parents don't belong here. Bethany tried to snatch the notes. Maya's hand stayed put. 24 hours! That Jeep goes, Bethany hissed. A federal marshal stepped forward, badge glinting. Ma'am, keep your hands off the witness. The crowd swelled veterans in ball caps, young parents, teachers, while Bethany forced a smile that looked stapled to her face. This is a private community matter. No, Maya said, calm as a lit fuse. This is federal. She tilted the mic. You forged rules, stalked families, and blocked law enforcement at the gate. Want to deny it live? Bethany's jaw worked. Then she turned to leave. Walk out, Maya added, but the evidence walks in right after you. If you're watching, answer this. When a bully grabs the mic, do you shrink or make them speak into it? The Willowbrook Community Center had become a pressure cooker. 6 news crews jammed the side aisles. Agents lined the back wall, arms crossed, eyes steady. Military families from 3 states stood shoulder to shoulder. some clutching folders like shields, others just holding on to one another. The air tasted like burnt coffee and accountability. Congressional aides filled the front row with notebooks open. They weren't here for quotes, they were here for statutes. Outside, signs waved "Protect our service families," "End board abuse," while inside the temperature rose with each name read into the record. If you've ever wondered what suburban justice looks like, start with a full room and a stack of documents no one can ignore. Power changes hands when the truth has a microphone and a timestamp. Maya went first. The shy teacher who once whispered on phone calls now carried the room like a trial attorney. "For 5 years," she said, voice steady, "this board fabricated violations, weaponized fines, and targeted military households to clear properties for pre-sold deals. She lifted originals from a labeled box. Here are the 1,987 bylaws that protect government and military vehicles. Here are the forged updates you mailed. Here are the insurance claims you filed for damage that didn't exist." The screen behind her, lit with timelines, citations, emails, bank transfers, each link snapping into the next. "Neighbors, this is not about lawn height. It's about a paper racket that tried to turn families into line items." She looked straight into the nearest lens. If your board tells you the rules changed, ask to see the first copy, not the latest pamphlet. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez took the floor like flipping a switch from anger to law. "We call this what it is: organized suburban crime," she said, nodding to agents carrying evidence boxes to a table marked with chain of custody seals. Predicate acts include embezzlement of community funds, mail and wire fraud, civil rights conspiracy, witness intimidation, and obstruction. She gestured to a flowchart. HOA accounts to Carl's shell companies to out-of-state developers, wiring deposits on homes not yet theirs. Interstate commerce triggers federal jurisdiction. Pattern makes it racketeering. And, when the pattern targets service families and the elderly, civil rights statutes attach like anchors. Papers slid across the table. The room leaned in. "This ends the myth that private boards live above the Constitution." My turn came with the kind of quiet I learned in deployment, the second before the door goes in. "Bethany didn't cut a lock on a commercial eyesore," I said. "She cut a lock on a task force jeep carrying $347,000 in surveillance gear tied to cartel cases in 4 states. The murmur rippled, then stilled. "She triggered kill switches, GPS pings, internal cameras, and federal alerts. She blocked agents at a gate and announced there was no federal jurisdiction in her neighborhood. That is not community management. That is interference with law enforcement and national security." I let the silence stretch. But here's the deeper offense: the campaign to push uniforms and wheelchairs off these streets so a spreadsheet could look cleaner. That was the plan. Today, we closed the file on it. Marshal Jennifer Torres didn't grandstand. She walked with the calm of someone who's made bad days end. "Bethany Kensington Wright," she said at the aisle seat, "you are under arrest for theft of federal law enforcement property, conspiracy to violate civil rights, embezzlement, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice." The cuffs clicked, clean and final, a sound that felt like a door closing and air returning. Cameras caught Bethany's face moving from outrage to math charges, counts, years. Carl slipped toward the side exit and ran straight into 2 agents who had been waiting there since sunrise. No chase, no speech, just a handshake between choices and consequences. 18 months later, I read the sentencing memo at Grandma's kitchen table, the same wood where we used to do multiplication and patch budgets. The judge's words were plain and heavy: domestic terrorism disguised as community governance. 8 years for Bethany, no parole, restitution ordered. 6 years for Carl and a lifetime bar from public office. Restitution funds rebuilt what their fines had broken. You could feel the neighborhood exhale. Maya, elected president in an emergency vote, rolled out reforms the week after the arrests. Transparent books, published agendas, body cam policy for contractors, and the Willowbrook Military Family Bill of Rights written into the bylaws. If you want to change a culture, put rights in writing and give them teeth. Where Bethany's house once loomed, we voted to build a park. Asset forfeiture paid for swings and shade sails. Bronze plaques carry the names of families who stood firm when it cost them. On Saturdays, you hear kids laughing where threats used to echo, and you catch the soft slap of a flag halyard where a lock once clanged. The smell shifted, too, from fear and fertilizer to cut grass and charcoal. It's not poetry. It's maintenance, the kind that keeps humans, not hedges, at the center. People asked if property values would fall when we hauled corruption into daylight. They rose 31%. Turns out, buyers like communities that can prove they're honest. The ripples left town the second our files went online. Congress held hearings. The Tank Rodriguez Act passed with provisions you can quote at a meeting. Mandatory financial transparency for boards, SCRA enforcement with criminal penalties, a federal hotline for systematic HOA discrimination, and a national database so patterns can't hide zip code to zip code. Recall thresholds dropped to 25% of owners. Prosecutors in 17 states borrowed our template and filed cases against boards that confused letterhead for law. If you're dealing with the same storm, we left you a map. Start with originals, collect video, build a timeline, petition, vote, escalate. You don't need a hero. You need a folder, a neighbor, a camera, and a deadline. Life filled the spaces, corruption left. Maya turned our war room into a training hub and launched the Rodriguez Foundation for Military Family Rights. Her workshops teach people how to pull records, read ledgers, and keep their tempers without losing their edge. 23 scholarships have already carried service kids to campuses that once felt unreachable. Mrs. Patterson, 91 and unbreakable, still opens meetings with a gavel knock that says, "Enough. I married Rebecca Martinez and moved next to Grandma's." Maya married David Captain Chen's brother, and their reception filled the same hall where the cuffs clicked. Community, it turns out, tastes like potluck mac and cheese when the fear is gone. We close each year with Freedom Day in the park. Families set out folding chairs where courtroom clips once looped on phones. Vets swap stories. Kids build cardboard evidence boxes and learn what receipts are for. A banner that used to read "Protect Military Families" now says "Protect Each Other." At dusk, I raise a hand and ask the oldest question we have. Who here stood up when standing up was expensive? Hands go up. Some shake. All count. Then Maya ends exactly the way she began, plain, direct, and impossible to shake loose. "Stand up to bullies," she says into a mic that once shook in her fingers. But do it the right way. Your turn, listener. If a clipboard tries to make fear a policy on your street, will you move and let them write your ending, or turn on the lights and write it yourself?